probably really worse in water. It's just hard. Do they ever reschedule it? Do they ever cancel it? I mean, it's smells here. Just like, and rescheduling is tough too.
Sunday we're playing tournament multiple games, and each game shorts and t-shirt.
Right.
I know it was on the
We're in the car, just get to the
So I really get it. I was
So Scott's here, just talking to you.
There's always situations.
Hi.
Always on the high. And that was James New Orleans was a classic. The French was the highest one. And then the city zoo.
Welcome everyone to the South Russell Village Special Council meeting. Today is Wednesday, May the 3rd, 2023. It's 7 p.m. The fiscal officer will take the roll.
Porter is absent. Canton.
Here.
Kellogg. Here. Kalicki.
Here.
Porter.
Here.
Bell.
Here.
All right, we need a motion to approve the absence of Councilman Berger. You have a motion? Moved by Canton, second by Kavanaugh. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, this is a special council meeting, so we can talk about Spring Lakes culverts. We can't talk about trash day or Boston Time Parade or anything like that, but we'll deal with Spring Lakes culverts. Just to give you an example of looking at the village, basically we deal with the Chillicothe is a dam. Water that runs from east to west, hits Chillicothe, and it's either got to go under it, or sometimes it goes over it. So that's the issue that we're dealing with here. This is where the location of the first culvert we'll talk about. Basically, it's what's called the Manor Brook culvert. It'll be coming across right through here. It is on the little map that you have. It'll come right across through here and go through this little opening, basically right there. That's the northernmost culvert we'll be talking about today. Eric, I'm going to talk for about 2 minutes and then we'll jump in and.
Okay, yeah, I can give a brief overview, but I'm more comfortable with just answering questions.
Okay, we'll just keep rolling. The second culvert is going to be at the intersection of Bell and Chillicothe. It's simply, basically some street issues. But this is the one that affects your lakes. This is the picture.
The swim lake.
Yes. This is the ditch next to Dr. Rosenthal's former office. This is the water that heads from right behind us here, under Chillicothe Road, to Chagrin Lakes Swim Lake. This is where the culvert, you can even see the crack in the road where it's cracked over the years. And this is the water, and this was the construction of the central retention basin, which is south of us, to catch the water that's coming here. This is the central retention basin. You can see how deep it is. And the second Spring Lakes culvert is near the intersection of Shearbrook and Chillicothe. It's designed to stop situations like this when the water backs up from the 100-year storms that we get. Okay. Public utilities, Mr. Berger is at a different meeting tonight. Mark Porter is on public utilities. They have got the job and been dealing with stormwater for a couple of years. I'll have Mark say a few words before we turn everything over to Eric.
Hi, everybody. In Chris's absence, just a few brief comments. We've been putting a lot of effort, stormwater mitigation over the last couple of years. The effort really began with the catch basin we put in at Chelsea Port back in 2006-07, thereabouts. That was our first big project for stormwater control. And that was about $500,000 for what is essentially a large block of concrete that catches water, slows it down, and sends it on its way. The Manor Brook Phase 319 grant project the mayor referred to was our next one, which you can drive by and see. We're hoping it grows in well, so that the people of Manor Brook don't have anything negative coming from that project. But it is essentially, as the mayor said, water flows from east to west. Chillicothe is like a large dam. So in order to move the water from east to west, the culverts have to be upsized, but you also have a place for it to go so that it can be contained and not flood people out. The central retention basin over here costs roughly about $500,000. So every time we do a stormwater project, it's for this village, big money and big effort. So the central retention basin went in first because that's where the water will collect. And once we got that done, upsizing the culverts is the next step, so that the water can be transferred east to west, doesn't flood anybody out. Those of you who've lived here long enough remember when the dentist office, Dr. Rosenthal's office, flooded out periodically because of too much water. There's a flow control device that is on the culvert that's currently installed at the central retention basin, so that the flow of water can be controlled so it doesn't flood out anybody. So we're moving essentially east to west to control flooding within the village. And the next big one is this summer with the culvert replacements that we were talking about here. And the concerns of Chagrin Lakes have heard that you don't want to be flooded out in place of other people who were flooded out. And we understand that, which is why we did the central retention basin first, so that it would be the collection point. Now it's time to upsize the culverts. And with that, the engineer, by the way, we're not done. Manor Brook Phase 2 is hopefully our next big project, which is the section of land that's south of Manor Brook Drive. And it's possible, though it's certainly not a settled question at this point, there might be a smaller retention basin built on Fox Run property that will help the people in Sugar Bush and on downstream. So that's where we stand right now. So Eric, brief overview.
That was a great overview of where we're at now. I'd kind of like to briefly back us up about 4 decades. When the culverts were put under Chillicothe Road, they were put in using what's called in the engineering world 10-state design standards. Ohio and 9 other states kind of collaborated to make these standards. And the 10-state design standards for sizing a culvert under a roadway.
Plenty of room up front, folks, go right ahead.
Just like church. Says that the culvert that you put under a roadway needs to be capable of passing a 25-year storm. And that's what we've got. I mean, that's what went in under Route 306, 40, 30, 25 years ago. And those culverts functioned and have functioned to transmit the 25-year recurrence storm across 306 from east to west. In recent, we'll say recent decade, in about 10, 12 years ago, I noticed, as well as everybody else in the engineering community who deals with stormwater noticed, that the storms we're getting, particularly in Lake and Geauga counties, they're a little more severe, a lot more severe than they used to be. We get the same amount of rain during the year, if you average it all out, but it comes in really short bursts, and it comes in really intense bursts. And when the clouds open up, that rain piles up fast. It overwhelms those 25-year design storm culverts really quickly. Even if it's not a 25-year storm, the intensity in the short amount of time that the water accumulates to go across, it overwhelms them. So, as Mark said, in around 2007-ish, 8-ish, South Russell, being a little bit ahead of the curve, actually a lot ahead of the curve at that point, said, you know, when we're building these stormwater improvements and trying to fix stormwater problems, sticking with the 25-year design storm, we're shooting ourselves in the foot, because they're getting overwhelmed with storms that are less severe than a 25-year storm, just because the rain is coming so quickly and the intensity of the rain is coming so strong. So South Russell mandated that let's build everything new that we're going from, here henceforth to accommodate a 100-year storm. And that's a 100-year storm has statistically a 1% chance of happening in any given year. It's not that it only comes once every 100 years. It's that every year there's a 1% chance of having a 100-year storm. Here in the village, we've had several. As I'm sure everyone here knows, like when it rains, it pours, quite literally. So there's two, you folks are all here from Chagrin Lakes subdivision area, I'm presuming. There's two culverts that we're replacing out of the 4 as part of this project that are going to have a direct impact on you. The first is the culvert that is just south of Village Hall. There's our new retention basin. If you look out this window, you can see it. It's the big dry basin that looks like a lawn. That collects and impounds water and slows it down and releases it slowly. There's a 15-inch culvert that goes under 306 Chillicothe Road, right next to Dr. Rosenthal's old office. And as everybody here is painfully aware, during a big storm, if we get something more than a 25-year storm, it piles up so deep on the west side or on the east side of 306 that it flows over the top of completely overwhelms that 15-inch culvert, comes cascading over the road and into the Chagrin Lakes swim lake, the HOA swim lake. That's where that water ultimately flows. And your swim lake has experienced a lot of flooding, erosion, all sorts of issues over the past, we'll say, decade especially, because that culvert's too small to accommodate anything more than a 25-year storm. And when it builds up and comes over the road, you get everything. It's almost like a dam breaking. Like when it builds up and crests the road, that 15-inch culvert is not slowing it down anymore. It just comes. The central retention basin is designed to accommodate a 100-year storm, and so the water can pile up there and much more slowly come across Route 306. And it's sized so that the 15-inch culvert that's currently there now is going to be the controlling feature. It's never going to come over the road, and it's not going to come out any faster than that 15-inch would allow. The reason why we're upsizing it to a 30-inch is a 30-inch culvert is what's required to transmit a 100-year storm across the road. It's not to say that the water's going to just free flow in. There's going to be a 15-inch orifice in a control structure that regulates that water and allows it to back up and flood the flood basin, and then more slowly come out and meter its way out across the road. We're replacing that culvert with a 30-inch culvert in the event that we get more than a 100-year storm. So that, let's say a storm comes, that retention basin gets overwhelmed. The goal is to not have water come cascading across the state highway. It's a main arterial for health and safety reasons. We can't be closing that. So worst case scenario, the retention basin is full, can't hold another drop of water. then that 30, the full bore of that 30-inch pipe gets engaged and gets the water across the road so that it doesn't come over the top of the road, it can go underneath the road. That's the purpose of replacing that 15-inch culvert with a 30. It's a worst case scenario, just in case. It's not going to allow any more water to come to the swim lake any faster. On the contrary, anything within a 100-year storm will slow that water down and make it basically a 15-inch tube of water that comes down that existing ditch, which is what the ditch can currently handle. So that's the first culvert that is going to be of concern to you guys. The second culvert that's going to be of concern to you guys is the one that's it's basically at the intersection of Shearbrook and 306 Chillicothe Road. The lantern, it's between, Shearbrook and the lantern. That's where the culvert crosses. The culvert there now is almost big enough to transmit a 100-year storm. I think it is a 21-inch culvert, if I'm not mistaken, Tim.
It's larger than 12, I think.
Right. The downstream end that you guys can see from Shearbrook is a concrete pipe. It's either 18 or 21 inches.
Oblong.
It's oblong. It's almost big enough to accommodate a 100-year storm, but not quite. The problem with it is on the upstream side, it's been, for some reason, added on to over the years, and they used smaller and smaller pipe. So that culvert will never flow full because there's restrictions that are on the upstream end of that culvert by the lantern property, which you guys can't see from Shearbrook. So we're replacing that with a 24-inch culvert so that it can transmit the 100-year storm across the road, because that's another area where it didn't happen as much as up here by Dr. Rosenthal's office, but that area down there by the lantern has on occasion overtopped the road, and then you get the big wash of water once it comes over the road, and it comes into that first pond that's closest to 306 and Shearbrook. So those are the two culverts the two of the four of the culverts that we're replacing. The other one's much farther up north, and the other one's a small 12-inch that crosses Bell Road just by the Village Hall Service Department. And those are not really of much consequence to you guys because the water doesn't come to any of your areas. So with that, I guess you can raise hands, questions. I'm better answering questions than I am giving a presentation.
Go ahead.
Can we have your name and address, please?
Sandra Meyer, 1106. I have two questions. The opening of that culvert you're saying on Shearbrook and 306 is, you think, either 18 or 21 inches right now?
Correct. And we're replacing it with a 24-inch culvert, slightly bigger than the one that's there now.
With a bigger opening as well.
Correct.
So you and Bill were at my house. You've been working a lot on drainage, so have we, because we didn't want to flood. And Shearbrook, as the water comes down in a heavy storm, not just 100 years, but in a heavy
Right.
storm, the drain in front of our house becomes a geyser. It overflows. The swale is full. Half of our front yard is full. We had two drainage contractors come out because it was getting to me to be too close. We agreed too close to the house. Both of them said there's nothing wrong with your drainage. The problem is when it shoots down to the street, it hits a torrent of water, and there's no place for that water to go. So I feel kind of betrayed because here we are. We just decided we're going to invest in the drainage ourselves, and we did, pushing it to the back of the property so it can go down into that little culvert that there. But it was all our expense because the village did not adequately drain Shearbrook. And now you're saying you want to add more water coming down Shearbrook. It makes me livid. I feel very betrayed. I feel like other communities, other subdivisions, other people need to do more in their neighborhoods because it's not right to send it all to us. Or you gotta vastly improve the drainage on Shearbrook.
If I understand this right, Sandy, I'm not sure.
Could you please identify yourself now?
Diane Thomas, I'm at Maple Springs, by the way, Redwood. It'll be more water, but it'll be slower, is that correct?
To the swim lake, yes, because the central retention basin that's
Yeah.
right adjacent to Village Hall
That-
nearly slows that water down.
No, ours is wood.
Yeah, so,
It's already a problem.
yes, yes.
John, really?
Well, actually, ma'am, did you have a bigger question than that, or?
I have another one, but we'll finish with her first.
Okay, well, I think you're,
Go ahead.
I think you're up.
I want to know, when you guys do all this work, is the road gonna be closed? Is
Uh,
306 gonna be closed?
It's not gonna be closed. The contractor that we have engaged to perform the culvert replacements, all 4 of them, it's called Grade Line Incorporated. They're a smaller contractor. I personally worked with them on and off for 20 years. I think they're a good, responsible contractor. Their plan is to have local closures, 1 lane at a time, and they're gonna use the temporary red light, green light setup so that traffic can go through. They don't anticipate more than 2 days at any of the culverts to get across 306. So will there be traffic inconvenience? No, certainly, just because the 306 is so busy. But it should be minimal, at least for a minimal duration.
Well, we could go around Dell and come out there.
Right.
Yeah, option. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
John Relly at 1057 Sherbrooke. There's houses on Sherbrooke, many houses that have already flooded with the volume of water that we have today. Though that flooding is happening either because it is actually stormwater backing into the houses, or because the stormwater drains are so full that our house drains, our gutters have nowhere to go. And so that backs into the houses. I don't have a problem with culverts if you address the whole problem, but to me, this is half the problem. This is getting it across the road and then making it our problem. And that is not acceptable. What we need to do is address how that water is gonna move through Chagrin Lakes before we open up the spigot and potentially double in a 100-year rain the amount of water that is flowing through. You should start there and then open up the spigots, because otherwise we're gonna deal with more flooding for the next 2, 3, 5, 7 years until there's some grant to do something about our homes. And they are back after bad storms. You see people's basement carpet sitting out on the road as you drive up and down. It's already happening. Any increase in water is only going to increase the flooding that happens going down, at least Sherbrooke, because that's the one I drive up and down. So I believe it's really irresponsible to not address the roads and how to get it out of our neighborhood entirely, not just put it over 306 and then make it all our problem.
Mr. Place.
Thanks. Place 1087 Sherbrooke. I'm the current president of Chagrin Lakes HOA. And, I appreciate you doing this meeting. I would like to point out, the contract's been signed, the project's going, this is all kind of pointless. What we say here means nothing. You've already done the contract.
That's not right.
It's true. Those pipes are sitting over there, they're getting installed. There's a pile of pipes in the parking lot. So, to do this dog and pony show for us now is insulting. I'm sorry.
Is that true?
Eric just said contract had been signed.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So, I did want to give council, I've got 4 copies. This is my email, James, with the mayor. I gave them to our residents, but I gotta tell you that, the reason we're here is because of the complete lack of communication between the village and our HOA and our residents. And it's a long-standing problem. And the cause of that problem is the mayor. And I think a lot of you know me. I've lived, and I'm only saying this because I have a course of dealing with the village. I've lived here most of my life. I've been on 2 HOA boards. I've been president of 2 different HOA boards in this community. I was on council for 7 years, and I'm the longest serving member of planning commission. And I've dealt with past mayors, I've dealt with past councils. This would have never happened before. and this is absolutely insulting to us, that you don't tell us about this, you don't communicate with us. The first communication I got about that culvert at Sherbrooke was the mayor emailing me, it's in those emails, was the mayor emailing me saying, hey, yeah, we might destroy your sign, if we do, we'll fix it or replace it, we're doing the culvert. I sent an email back, hey, I'm gonna need a little more information, are you enlarging the culvert? Didn't respond to me for 6 days, sends an email, says, I sent your email to CT. I had to do a public records request, which, by the way, CT still hasn't responded to my public records request. So you're having this meeting with us, the pipes are sitting out in the parking lot, and you haven't, and not only didn't you engage us and try to talk to us about this project, you haven't even fully responded to my public records request, so I can't come here somewhat educated and talk about this. So very, very, very insulting. And I gotta tell you, as somebody who's served in various capacities in this village, I'm absolutely appalled at the treatment from our mayor. I've asked to meet with him repeatedly. I said, we don't need a special village council meeting. Just get the street committee, a couple of our HOA people, and Eric on a Zoom meeting. I just wanted to know what was going on. Refuses to communicate with me. Told me he'd meet with me, he'd be at the building department between 8 and 11. I came up to the village campus, sat here for an hour, waiting for him. He never showed up. I invited him to my office to meet with me, he never responded. So, and I'm not here to argue about the mistreatment, it's all in the emails, but that's how your mayor is treating our residents. And you as council members, I'm sorry, you're supposed to advocate for the residents, and you're not. You're trusting him to communicate with us, and he's not. You can't just come to these meetings twice a month and trust that the mayor's doing his job. He's not doing his job, you need to do your jobs. You get paid to do your jobs, that's what you're elected to do. I engage with residents when I sit in those chairs. You need to do the same, I'm sorry. Danielle, could you pull up the 2021 stormwater study for the village?
Maybe that's one I emailed you.
If you want to see it on the screen.
And Eric, you didn't really give a correct answer. According to the 2004 to 2021 village stormwater study, that's a 15-inch culvert at the lantern. That's a 15-inch opening, according to these.
No, I thought it was a 12. Okay, I'm going off the top of my head.
I mean, but I think my number one issue is you sending this enormous amount of water over, and John said it absolutely correctly. The lantern was not engineered properly, that's CT's fault. You let them build a giant nursing home across the street from us, and there's 2 tiny detention basins in the front. That's your stormwater control for that property. Am I saying anything incorrect, Eric?
The stormwater retention basins out front were sized for the impervious area only that the lantern added. It wasn't sized to pick up water from beyond the lantern coming in.
It doesn't hold very much water. So, before we get to the stormwater study, Bill, could you put up you put on that little slideshow at the beginning, you had a picture of in front of the lantern. Could you throw that up on the screen, please?
Which one do you want now? I can't have them both at the same time.
Well,
I have the master stormwater study.
okay, I'll take the master stormwater.
What page would you like?
Go to the end of the exhibits. There's a map at the end, a topographical map that has the culvert at Sherbrooke and Chillicothe in pink.
While he's doing that, may I ask a question?
Yeah, and by the way, Ruth, I apologize for how angry I am, but read those emails. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous how our neighborhood, and this goes back before this. I mean, this thing you put in down here, this retention basin that you put in South Village Hall, that's wonderful for us. That was a wonderful project. You guys were dragged kicking and screaming into that. First, you told us you were doing a retention project over here, and you built that habitat. We were lied to at a whole HOA meeting. You all know about that. And you, the mayor especially, was kicking and screaming to do that project, which the engineer recommended a long time ago to address our swim lake. I appreciate that you finally did it. I appreciate that expenditure. And I do think that has greatly solved problems not only for our swim lake, but for our residents on the Parkland Royal Oak Lake. Absolutely huge improvement, great thing you did. A lot of arm twisting to get you to do it, but you did it, so thank you. But now we got this problem down at Sherbrooke, and this is significant, so if we can get the stormwater study up.
My question is, and this is actually the first I've heard about this, and people know they can contact me. So, and Jim, you know me well, you know me. Would it be fair to say that the flooding and the overflow was with the building of the lantern?
I think on Sherbrooke, and I think a lot of the complaints you're hearing about on Sherbrooke, yes, I do think that is a giant contributor. There was a bit of relief offered when the village worked with the Federated Life Center to do that control valve on there, but that's a pretty small retention basin over there. I mean, it's very small. But that did help a tiny bit. The problem is, whatever help you gave us by doing that, this is going to completely move that. And if we can get into the stormwater study, and then that picture was in the slideshow, you'll see what I'm talking about. You just scroll down a little bit, Bill. So I get the bottom of that.
Can we turn it 90 degrees?
Yeah. Well, this way's fine, because I don't really care about the top. I want to just focus on this area down here. Ooh. Okay. So I'm just going to say at the outset, and I'll 11. If you do this project, which you've already agreed to do, so it's happening. This is 1188 Sherbrooke. You will flood this home. Period. You will flood these people's homes. I'm saying it now. It's recorded. This house will be flooded. Eric, this is the topographical map.
Yes.
So this topography goes right up to their front door, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
It does.
Well, the topography, yes, the topography goes everywhere.
So I'm just saying though, if water gathers here, we're right at the front door, right where that's even with the ditch line. That's all the same depth right there, right?
Correct, but that
Okay.
topography doesn't I mean, you could say any one of these lines, like, oh, the water's gonna go to here.
No, I'm not talking about, I'm talking about this is gonna fill up like a bathtub right up to their front doorstep.
It could.
It does.
It does already.
It
Right, if it's a big enough rainstorm, it could.
Oh, okay, and that's before you've done this. So now, did you do any study as to how, and I know the answer is no, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Did you do any study on the impact of increasing this culvert in relation to the flow of water through these two driveway culverts, through this detention basin, and through this way undersized culvert system that ultimately goes under Maple Springs? Did you do any study?
Yes.
You did?
However, your premise is a little bit flawed.
My premise one, you're sending more water there.
You're assuming
I think Eric's got the floor to respond to your question. Go ahead, Eric.
you're assuming that we're holding an immense amount of water over here, and upsizing this culvert is gonna make all of that water come here faster. We're not holding, the storage capacity on the east side of Chillicothe Road is really, really minimal.
Oh, okay, that's great. Bill, could you put up the slideshow you had at the beginning of this meeting? We're gonna look at a picture of how much water is being held.
Yeah, it's about a quarter of an acre that floods to about 30 inches deep.
Yeah, there's a great picture that we showed at the beginning of this.
And
It's,
that's in front of the lantern, is that what it's?
Correct, that's in front of.
we've all seen a ton of water fill up on the east side of 306, but there's a picture of it, so we don't have to sit here and argue. Let's pull up the picture, please. You got it?
Then you're gonna lose this.
That's fine. I just want, while we're working through this, he just said it's not like there's a ton of water that we're going to send across Chillicothe and Sherbrooke, so.
Mrs. Meyer, you live on Sherbrooke?
Yes, I live at 1106 where the existing drainage is already inadequate. We've been fortunate in that it hasn't come into our basement. So that's why we had to do
So
that.
you're about halfway down?
Halfway
Yes.
down.
Sir, would you identify yourself as when you
Mark
said
Levy,
it's coming in?
1104 Sherbrooke.
Say again?
And Mark Levy, 1104 Sherbrooke. And when that same drainage backs up, it didn't hit her house, but it washes out my driveway, goes into the garage in my basement. It's happened 3 or 4 times in the 8 years that I've lived here.
Is that, I think we're getting into two situations.
But
Water
it's
flowing,
washing through the street and into the stormwater.
water coming down Shearbrook and a culvert.
It kind of does an angle right in that, it goes towards you. It's not near the land.
Right.
Yeah,
But it's coming down the street.
it's coming down the street and then.
But Mayor, our concern is that by expanding culverts, we're gonna send more down Sherbrooke. Comment, just thinking through, we're gonna expand, we have water coming down on Sherbrooke, flooding into people's houses. We're going to significantly expand the size of the culverts. There is only one outcome. More water will go through a bigger culvert. It may be limited on the end, but you said if we hit 100-year rain, it's gonna oversize it and more water will come down through. All I'm asking is, make the plan for how we're gonna deal with it on our side of the road before you release the torrents of water. Because we're already having problems.
Or put a proper retention or detention project on the east side of 306. Okay, so, Eric,
Yeah,
I mean, you just told us, it's not like there's a ton of water that we're gonna be more quickly sending under 306 to Sherbrooke.
correct.
That is across from Sherbrooke.
Yeah,
So all of that is going to be significantly hastened in its travel underneath 306 into that house on Sherbrooke. Right?
Mr. Flays, all of it gets there anyhow. Once it breaches the road, it comes.
That's not Route Road. You want to empty all.
It's very, very close.
I don't understand, Mayor. I mean, I guess I'm confused. You're greatly expanding that culvert, right?
We're expanding the culvert, the size, yes. We're expanding the capacity of the culvert to be able to transmit a 100-year storm
Okay.
across.
So what percentage capacity are you increasing?
Right now, it's sized to transmit a 25-year culvert, or 25-year storm across the road.
So as a percentage, what increase?
It's not, because a 100-year storm isn't 4 times as much water.
What if you take a 15-inch culvert and you increase it to a 30-inch
It's
culvert?
24.
Jane, how-
Let him finish.
Correct.
I mean, answer the question, please. What is the percentage increase?
Between a 15-inch culvert and a 24-inch culvert?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's the question.
Taking you a second.
Ma'am, what was your name?
Jane Helwig?
Well, Eric, I guess I just want everybody to understand, I mean, that's what you're doing. You're sending that into that person's front yard. And the 2 small driveway culverts and the outlet of that detention basin at Sherbrooke and Maple Springs is not, you're gonna quickly take that into a situation where those openings aren't being addressed, and the water's just gonna back up on our side. But instead of backing up and blocking the Lantern driveway, it's gonna back up into people's homes. And that's the problem here. And it's something that we could have had a nice, rational conversation about 2 months ago if you guys would actually communicate with us. Because we live this. None of you, nobody that sits on council and the mayor even lives in our voting precinct, lives in that entire quadrant of the village. We live with this. And instead of talking to us about this, you didn't. You forged ahead and you've signed on the dotted line for this project that's going to impact the safety and really the security of our residents. And that's the problem.
So Jim, this is not fair, but just asking a kind of a step-by-step as an HOA, what it is you might see without the sit-down. Not that that's not necessary, but what you might see as some solutions right here.
Well, I think the solution is to, if your problem is that water is gathering on the east side of 306 and you want to keep 306 open, your solution has been to send a torrent of water into our neighborhood.
Under the road.
Under the roadway. My solution is you know, you don't have to do this, you know, I mean, this looks like Brown Stadium down here, which is great, but this thing's huge, I get it. But what, I mean, there's a lot of room up at the Lantern. Why doesn't the village, and there's ways that the village can do this, why doesn't the village create a retention or detention project on the east side of 306, like you did over here, to handle that water so you don't have to release the onslaught into our neighborhood of all of that water? Answer me that. That's the solution.
I think that's one solution. I think there's others. Eric, can you comment?
Sure, I did the math, it's a 30% increase in capacity.
How can that be if the diameter is almost doubling?
It's not.
It's
15 to 20.
It's not.
15 to 21, that's not bad.
Okay, I thought it was 15 to 28, my apologies.
It's 30.92% increase in the capacity that pipe can efficiently move the water across the road, 30%.
Okay, so what are the other solutions?
I'm honestly a huge fan of creating more retention on the east side of
I was
306.
gonna say, if you keep the water on that
That's
side.
probably our most cost-effective solution. I would look to, we have an informal partnership with the Family Life Center. A lot of the water comes kind of from down there. Before we put our restrictor on the Family Life Center retention area, that retention area didn't retain a drop of water. It just came in and flowed out as fast. In all the years I've been the engineer for South Russell, I should note that that's not in South Russell, it's in Bainbridge. But I've been the assistant engineer or the engineer for South Russell since 1999. And I have never seen a drop of water accumulate in that retention area that the Family Life Center had. The streets department and council and the mayor approached the Family Life Center and said, hey, we know it's not a problem for you that you're not retaining any of your storm water, but it's a problem for us and our residents. Can we spend a little bit of money on your pond to make a modification so that it functions properly? And we did that. Given, as Mr. Flays pointed out, that pond's not huge. So it's a help, but it's not enough. The ponds at the Lantern, as Mr. Flays pointed out, again, are not huge, but they are designed, they're designed to the design standards that I'm bound to. They capture, when that was a field, before it was the Lantern, a certain amount of water came across that field and made its way across 306. The Lantern came, so put a rooftop there, put a big asphalt parking lot there. It caused a lot more water to run off. That's the word. It increased the runoff coefficient of that piece of land by a lot.
Yes.
The ponds are sized so that it compensates for the difference between the pre-construction phase and the post-construction phase. That's what we have to hold the Lantern to. We can't hold the Lantern to areas that are to the east and beyond, because a lot of the water is coming from the east and beyond. Those ponds don't accommodate that water. They only accommodate the increase in impervious surface that the Lantern created. So yes, they look small, but they're on paper and for the math, they're enough to accommodate that increase in runoff because they paved versus having grass. The solution in my mind really would be to incorporate, get a much more formal agreement with the Family Life Center and blow out the eastern or the northern edge of their small retention area and make it a much bigger retention area that spills over into the Lantern property. So it's a bigger combined retention area. Bang for the buck. That's it. I mean, there's no better solution that's going to be more cost effective than that.
So So that's one. What about ditching on the Sherbrooke side?
Can we improve the drainage through Sherbrooke? Yeah, yes. But the bigger improvement, and if we're going for bang for the buck, is to slow the water down before it gets there. Let the ditches and let the stormwater infrastructure in Sherbrooke work and not be overwhelmed.
Could we increase the culvert size from Sherbrooke size into that lake we saw?
We can, but Tim and I looked at the outflow, what was it? It was last summer, Tim, right? When we looked at that, the resident that lives there was complaining that they were getting sinkholes in their yard and what are these things? So Tim and I went out and looked. It's a corrugated, the outlet for that first pond at the corner of Sherbrooke and 306, the round pond.
It's pathetic.
It is. It used to have a large diameter culvert that allowed water to come into it, pass through, and go out. That overflow or that exit culvert is in such bad shape that it's not letting the water out of that pond at the rate that it should. So we looked at the culvert that we've got, the Village owns under the road there, and it's a concrete culvert, it's a big culvert, it's at least 36 inches. It's in good shape, and it can take that water. But the water's not getting there. It's gotta come kind of diagonally from that pond over to that culvert, across the resident's lawn, front yard, side yard, and that outflow pipe from what we'll call Pond 1, the round pond, is in such poor shape that it's not letting the water drain out of that pond quick enough.
And so is it blocked or is it collapsed?
It's collapsing.
Can we see a picture of the area we're talking about, Mayor? Because we're talking culverts and culverts and culverts and.
While the mayor's pulling that up, I'd just like to ask council if the biggest bang for the buck for our tax dollar is to build another retention pond. If that's the most cost-effective solution, how do we end up signing a contract and buying culverts and digging up roads? If that's quoting the most effective, cost-effective way to manage this water, our tax dollars being spent, how could that not be the first option that's being addressed?
Eric, if you ask me, I can answer that. The reason why we're replacing the culverts is because they've been identified as undersized and they're paved in 306 this summer. We gotta get those culverts in before they pave. Well, it's good practice to get the culverts in before they pave. It looks bad for everyone to pave a new road and then dig it up and put a culvert across. That's why we're doing it now. That's why the timing is what it is because the state's coming through to pave 306 in July or August.
I guess what I would suggest is, what I'd like a commitment from council would be, I understand you've already awarded the contract, and you only have so many opportunities to put the culverts under. You're on the ODOT repay schedule.
We are.
I get all that. So, again, please try to reach out to us. That's all I can ask. And in the future, when you're doing projects that impact our neighborhood, reach out before the contract's signed would be nice. I guess what I would propose is, can we get a commitment that, okay, we're gonna put in this new giant culvert, that's fine. But put a restrictor on the east side of the culvert so that it functions as it currently does with the same outflow until the village can address a retention or detention project on the east side of 306. That would be my suggestion and my request.
Eric, from an engineering point of view, we did something similar with the central retention basin.
Right.
Is what Jim was asking about from an engineering point of view.
Is it doable?
Feasible.
Yeah, I would be fine
We
with
don't
that.
want to defeat the purpose of the upgrade if it's gonna have the same amount of water. I mean, can you explain that engineering wise for me?
So if you put a restrictor on there, because I'm lost at this point, tell us what'll happen.
Oh, sure, it'll behave exactly as it behaves now, and if the water builds up to the point where it's gonna come across 306, well, then it is, and it will. I hope it doesn't, but in the meantime, sure, that would give us the larger culvert, we'd be able to get the culvert in before the pave, and it would perform at its current level. So yes, it would allow about 1/4 of an acre of land on the east side of 306 to get about 30 inches of water in it. And then it would eventually breach and come over the road. It'll perform and behave exactly as it is now. I'm fine with that. I mean, because the culvert will be under the road and we can take the restrictor off if and when we have more retention on the east side.
Tim, what did you have?
Eric, there's that water that crosses into Pond 1.
Yeah.
Takes that northerly pipe,
Yeah,
crosses Maple Springs, goes into Pond 2, continues to the west.
That's Pond 1.
that's, yeah.
Pond 1. It crosses the road, goes into Pond 2,
Yeah,
keeps going to the west into Pond 3,
It's not, the rest of it is not there, that's it.
yeah.
and then goes into Pond 4, or does it cut and go towards Shearbrook? I've never walked back
Is,
there.
I don't know, is Pond 2 the one that follows Shiver on
That's what
down?
I'm saying, it doesn't follow that line.
It does follow that line, so it goes from, Pond 1,
It comes
2,
across
3,
to like
4.
the driveway between properties 5243 and 5241.
and then it
And
goes,
then it crosses the road and goes into 234.
and then it goes into a creek.
It goes out to McFarland eventually.
Yeah, so it goes into a creek behind, the only impact that would have would actually be the south side of Chelsea Court. So it goes into a ravine on the north side of Sherbrooke, but that doesn't impact any of our houses. But it would, when we had that really bad storm, it did impact some of the houses on the south side of Chelsea Court, that ravine. That's where that
So
water.
Eric, if we put this restrictor in place, it keeps the flow as it is now.
As it is now.
But if we get a 100-year storm, it's gonna breach the road.
As it does now.
But I think if that could be just temporary, until you address the other suggestion of the retention pond, then maybe as long as you're retaining more of the water, it might be right to reduce some of that restriction. I don't know, but
Let me respond to that. I've been on council since '05, and Jim was with me shortly thereafter. This 2004 stormwater study came out about that time while Jim and I and the others were all on council. Okay, that was 18 years ago, and we have only now got the central retention, Sherbrooke done. Chelsea was 07, 08, but that took monumental effort to make that happen. And I think, Bill, you were on council.
Yeah.
And I think Jim was too, when Chelsea was finally finished, but that was the first step. What I'm getting at is, this stuff, stormwater stuff, isn't something where we can do it tomorrow.
and that's my concern about opening up those culverts before we're able to, like Bill, because it might take 4 years or 5 years or 8 years to build a retention. If we just open up wide, full spigot, then we're gonna have that extra water for 8 years until the other issues are dealt with on the east side of 306. That's why, at most, I understand putting in the culverts while you can, but we need to do restrictor for no more water than we have now, because we're not even dealing with the water we have now.
I would also say this, in the last 2 years, Manor Brook and Central Retention Basin went in, partly because we got grants that paid for a large part of it, okay, and that was good, and that's all CT, acting on the direction of council, of course, to look for the money and find other people's money to do it.
CT Consultants, it's an
Okay.
engineer.
Eric, where would we put,
Mike, this is the company I work for.
Eric, where would we put another detention basin on the eastern side of 306?
I would say just north of the basin that's at the Family Life Center.
Or expand?
Expand that basin, basically. It would be stupid to build a one just adjacent to it and have a wall separate them. Just, get a formal agreement with the Family Life Center to expand their basin onto the Lantern property, which would involve an agreement with the Lantern as well.
Yeah, that's a big caveat, okay?
Eric,
It's in Bainbridge and it's private property, and they can tell us to go jump, no pun intended, into the lake.
They can.
Wouldn't that qualify as a SID potentially?
Yes.
Between Bainbridge and or the Lantern?
Absolutely.
Village? So there is an opportunity to pursue a special improvement district. It seems like it fits into the walls of that particular program, which might be viable instead of trying to approach it from an ad hoc basis to say, hey, we'll split the cost with you on a gentleman's agreement.
It actually fits very neatly into those confines.
So, but who would pay for the SID?
Well,
Family Life Center?
Let's don't get ahead of
That would be the
ourselves.
village.
We have one engineer, I think, one engineer in the room. So basically, what we're saying, I don't want to split these two issues. This is the new culvert. The water flows like it always does to this lake, this pond.
Is that a ditch or a culvert that takes?
This is a ditch.
It's a ditch.
It's a ditch.
It's a swale.
So we could expand the ditch if the homeowner was amenable.
No. Well, yes, we could, but it wouldn't do the folks in Chagrin Lakes any good to expand that.
Well, if it's deeper, it'll retain more water.
You're talking about putting maybe a longer, skinnier retention area there. Mark, there's not enough room and there's not enough fall there.
Right.
It's pretty flat.
There's no fall, I mean,
It's flat.
Then hang on. The water then leaves this lake, goes across underground to this culvert,
Yes.
and then it proceeds on to the other lakes on the north side of Shearbrook. Okay, now,
Okay.
those of you that are living on the south side of Shearbrook and you're getting water, I don't see how this water that stays on the north side of Shearbrook is getting to you. I think what we're running into is the typical water's coming down here in such a large volume and it's flowing downhill. So I think we're looking at two different issues. But let's realize we have engineering firms to make these decisions. We can speculate all you want. Sandra, you were next.
Well, I had a couple of thoughts. One, that the Family Life Center is now a community life collaborative, and it's a change of thing. But as an organization, they have a small building and a lot of property.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when I look at the Lantern, when I look at Kensington, when I look at, I guess it's Fox Run, and all these different communities, they don't have retention ponds or anything to slow it before it even gets to us. Whereas in Chagrin Lakes, it's like, we're doing more than our share of holding up water.
But you don't have retention. All your ponds are water, a drop water comes in and a drop water goes out as fast, so it doesn't,
Well, I wonder.
there's water there, but it's not retaining anything. It's not fluctuating.
Looking at how dense the building is in some of these areas, I'm just wondering if there's something that can be done before it even gets close to us to hold water.
All right, sir, you're next. Name and address.
This one?
Sure.
Yeah, it's only for the people that are moving, if we can hear you.
I'm Mark Hartog, I live at 1164 Sherbrooke on the south side, up near the top. We're just below the map. I wanted to endorse your comment about the water flow on the south side up toward our end. It's not so much from the Lantern. It is definitely from the development when the Family Life Center was put in. It increased somehow the water flow onto the high ground behind us. The area that now in theory has a retention pond between us and Wembley Club.
On the old interurban line.
Right.
Basically.
And anyway, since in the last 10 years or so, the time you're talking about, I'd say my water flow in the backyard, just flowing through the yard, has tripled, quadrupled, whatever. I tell my wife we have so much water now that I attract ducks. I found a duck under my bird feeder the other day. So But it's all coming from there, and the only solution long-term for the issue up at our end on the south side would be what he suggested, some grand agreement with the adjacent property owners to expand that retention pond. I think it would also go a long way toward solving some of the problems that Ms. Myers and the people down farther on Sherbrooke have, because it would tend to reduce the volume of water going into the storm sewer, or arguably not making it into the storm sewer and just sucking up toward their houses.
You've described a situation that's pretty much around the village now. 40, 50-year-old homes used to have a swale between them or a swale in their backyard. Those swales are pretty much flattened out.
Right.
And then now the water comes, and it comes faster.
More water is coming
Yes,
back.
more water is coming faster.
Mr. Todd,
Go
did
ahead.
that start with the lantern building, with the building of the nursing
No,
home?
my particular problem, I think, started with family life.
Okay, so longer, earlier, it started.
Well, in other words, if you lived on the other side of Sherbrooke, then it would be the lantern.
Your issue is more tied, I think, to Wembley when that was developed.
Yeah, so the big retention pond for Wembley is right behind me. But the problem is there's enough water coming through between the berm of the retention pond
Right, that's making it
and
around.
Sherbrooke, so that that's where the water flow is.
And Wembley is higher than you are.
Wembley's trackle higher than we are, yes.
So, because I asked this question about a month ago in my email to the mayor and never responded. So, when's the project start date?
Don't have a start date yet. I can give you a schedule. The schedule is based on when the contractor can get all of his materials. They're working on getting the materials. He gave me it's just a,
Basically, it's June, with the pavement coming in August.
it's, here's their, they're gonna start with the Sherbrooke, and then work their way up and then circle back to get the little 12-inch one that comes across the middle. But there's no hard dates in there. He says, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, based on when they can get the materials.
Okay.
And I talked to him today, and he's like, I don't have everything, these suppliers, so I can't give you.
I was hoping in 2 weeks.
Hoping, but it's
Okay.
fluid still.
What is the bond? Still have other questions, Bill. What is the bond that the contractor put up?
Oh, geez, it's the total contract value, which was $147,980.
That's being held by the village?
Well, no, it's a bond, so it's posted by a surety company.
So the village is not holding any money?
The village doesn't hold a cash check. The village holds retainage. Once the work starts, we hold 8% of the first 50% of the work complete.
Until when?
Until the project is completed and we're ready to issue.
So if our entryway sign is destroyed, I can come to the village council and ask that.
Absolutely.
8%. That's, one time to ask it for a month, and always answer.
As far as your public records request, you asked for a large volume. I've been slowly putting I can't drop everything I'm working on to say for the next 2 days, I'm gonna work on Mr. Blazes.
When I'm trustworthy, I tend to lash out and act like a jerk and give you those lengthy public records.
So I'm working on,
You could have just not,
I'm working on,
you wouldn't have had to answer it.
I don't have the,
I'm just
I
telling
don't
you,
have the personal freedom.
all you had to do was
to
tell you that.
I work at the discretion of the village.
Okay, and I get, they're not letting you meet with us, that's fine, but all you had to do was meet with our board, you wouldn't have had to answer a public records request. Okay, well, all our landscaping will return to its original state.
Correct, everything that was disturbed during the course of construction.
And you do understand it's not as simple as moving the sign, we have underground electric that goes from
Yeah, we're hoping
a meter on the fence.
We're hoping to avoid the sign and the electric completely.
Okay,
That's our first option and best option.
okay. So I got that commitment, all landscaping, there's a bond, we can apply to council, we're gonna have to go after a surety company or the contractor, we can come to council. Correct. And pursue a bond if our sign is damaged or destroyed.
Correct. The surety company posts and holds the bond. Council, actually, the village has cash in hand.
That's what I want to know.
It's 8% of the first 50% work, so it's a net 4% of that $147,918,000.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right,
And then,
yeah. Keep going.
again, I'm asking, will council make a commitment that you will put a restrictor on the east side of the culvert and maintain the flow at the status quo until a retention or detention project can be addressed on the east side of 306?
We can't make a decision like that until we get the recommendation from CT.
Oh, I can recommend that now.
Okay.
We can put the culvert in the ground, we can get the ODOT paving past us, and we can keep it functioning exactly how it is today.
Okay, so is this group committing to us to do that?
We'll do it on Monday. If the recommendation comes on Monday night, we have a council
You
meeting.
just made a recommendation.
Yeah.
I guess that's a council meeting. You made a recommendation, I'm asking.
Why can't you just take a vote?
I don't think you can.
You can make a
think so.
motion.
It's the same subject.
I think public utilities, which meets Friday at 9 o'clock here, should hear more from the engineer, make a recommendation to council. Oh, yeah, make a recommendation to council.
Mark, I've been through this rodeo with you guys before.
It's just a delay, Tam.
Yeah, exactly. I'm asking for somebody to make a motion. Dennis, will you please make a motion, see if this council will pass it?
You can take formal action. No, just hold on. You're talking about Monday night, we have a regular council meeting. We have a public utility meeting Friday. We have a council meeting Monday. There's no need.
What's this mean?
Yeah, this meeting is,
You know, I would never jump, you would never want us to jump in here because of just what was discussed tonight. We need to take our time and think about this. Come back on Monday at 7
I trust
o'clock.
the engineer and what he has to say. He's making a recommendation.
Mayor,
What else do you need?
Mayor, I would just say,
Make a motion?
there is a point, the engineer seems to wholeheartedly endorse the restrictor. I think it's a reasonable request from the HOA, given the fact that they have concerns about the increased potential of water flow. In order to accomplish the needs of the village with respect to placing a culvert prior to the paving project, seems like the HOA has no objection to the village proceeding with that. But I think it's a reasonable accommodation to the HOA to say, let's maintain or place a restrictor until such time as we have an opportunity to evaluate, the impact and maybe look at another solution on the east side of 306. So given that, and given the engineer's recommendation, I would move that council and the mayor accept the fact that, we will, and make a commitment that we will place a restrictor in the newly placed culvert to ensure that water flow is no greater than what it is today until a future solution can be addressed. So moved.
Second.
2 seconds.
Discussion.
That's okay.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
We had a couple people there. I think you were before Jane, and I forgot your name.
Diana,
Yes, please.
I just have a dumb question.
No.
Can these retention ponds or restrictor ponds, whatever you call them, can they be made deeper so they hold more water?
No.
No?
I would love to say yes, because it would make my life so much easier. If you've got a slight slope and the water's flowing from the high end of the slope down to the low end of the slope, and you just dig a big hole and it fills up with water, it's exactly like the ponds that you guys have now, where the water just comes in and it flows out at the same rate as it did before. How a retention pond or a retention basin works is that you've got to let water, the water surface has to be able to fluctuate a certain degree. So when it rains, they fill up and they hold water above where they normally would, and then there's a control structure that meters the water that comes out. It comes out at only up to a certain rate so that it flows out and that water level slowly over the course of a day or two, or sometimes 3, goes back to neutral. And it's that volume of, it's that up and down volume called freeboard, that gives you the retention and slow release. So it can fill up again during the next rainstorm and then slowly release out. Just digging a hole in the ground, deeper or bigger, doesn't give you any more freeboard.
Jamie.
I've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
One is, what will the effect of increasing the culvert size that goes to the swim lake have on the swim lake? Because I live on Royal Oak. I'm south of the swim lake. And when the swim lake replaced a culvert with a culvert that's twice the size of it, the issues changed significantly. And I think I'm hearing that that's the plan, that the culvert that currently leads over towards the community lake is going to be doubled in size.
No.
Yes, it's a bigger culvert, but it's being increased from a 15-inch to a 30-inch because a 30-inch will pass a 100-year storm. We've got a giant retention pond capable of holding a 100-year storm above that. The only reason that culvert is being replaced and upsized to pass a 100-year storm is if we get something. Council, this goes for you too. What we're going to build, we're building everything to accommodate and to accept a 100-year storm event or a 1% recurrence factor storm event in any given year. At some point, it is going to be exceeded. Sure. So the reason why we're upsizing that culvert, even though no more water will flow through it than what currently flows through the 15-inch culvert, is in the event that the retention area gets maxed out, it can pass underneath the road without overtopping the road and causing a big health and safety concern for police and fire and ambulance and everything else, because we have to close 306. That's why that culvert's being upsized. Any rain event that falls within that within and up to that 100-year recurrence interval won't have an adverse effect on your swim lake or in any properties downstream, because the retention basin is doing its thing. That culvert is being upsized in the event that we get a rain that maxes everything else out. We gotta pass that water under the road without having it go over. That's the simple answer.
So you're saying that no additional water should be going through that culvert unless we have a rainstorm that
exceeds 100 years.
exceeds that 100-year storm?
Correct, you got it.
Okay, that was my first question. My
Okay.
second question is, why, and I know why questions are ridiculous to ask, why has council not been talking about solving the East-South Russell's water problem with east retention issues, apparently until tonight?
Sorry, I'm speaking out of turn. If I could, council, please.
Because you're saying this is the no-brainer, this is the way that it's the greatest bang for the buck.
Right.
Well, why haven't we been doing it?
Because it's not easy. We don't own the land. We don't have control over that land. It's owned by the Family Life Center, and the Shearbrook intersection case. It's owned by the Family Life Center, and it's owned by the Lantern. So we're gonna have to broker a deal between the two of them to make something happen. And as Mark alluded, the stormwater projects that we have done, Chelsea Court and most recently the big retention pond we put in here by Village Hall, come at an incredible cost and effort to the village. It takes a long time to muster up enough cash and energy to make those projects happen. That's the best answer I can give you as to why we haven't started talking about this until now. We've been talking about this for a couple of 15 years. It just takes a long time. Local government moves at a glacial pace. It moves at the speed of government. We don't typically make snap decisions and say, oh, we're gonna spend a bunch of money to do this, because it might not be a good decision. We really have to look carefully at all of the advantages and disadvantages that come with spending such a huge chunk of money to make sure that our public, that your tax dollars are being used in the wisest possible manner. And that unfortunately just takes a lot of time.
Allow me to give an illustration. For the Manor project, that took 18 months to have the property correctly titled in the name of the entity that owned it, specifically Whitetail, because of how all the developments have been done. And it was an enormous, correct me if I'm wrong, solicitor or Mr. Prosecutor, how long that took to have it properly titled so the village could enter an agreement with the right entity that actually owned the property and then make it happen. I would never have thought when that first began that it would take so long to title property correctly. It'd be like your house is titled in your neighbor's name, not yours, and how long it takes to fix that. But once we got it going, it went fairly smoothly. The digging here, we weren't dragged. It took time to assemble the money to make that happen. Now, it didn't take 18 years. It became a priority in the last 4 or 5 years because council and everybody else has noticed what the engineer said. The rain comes harder, flooding is more of a concern now than when I came on council years ago. And it's become far more a priority, but it's big bucks every single time. That's why.
All right, a couple comments here as we wrap up. Communication. I think if you talk to the people from Parkland and James and other people, you'll find that this council and these members up here did a lot of work talking to the Parkland Dam people over the years. The chief and I go to every homeowners association meeting that we attend. We'll be here at 11:30 talking to the country estates people. We are told to stay away and not attend. You're the only one told not to attend the Chagrin Lakes. If you want me here Sunday at 4:30, I'll be here. I also invite you to stay after if you have individual questions. Thank you for your time. We have a motion to adjourn.
I do have, just before you go, because we talked about kind of the Sherbrooke, tube that's being put in. Is there the same restriction being put on the new tube that's going to go into the swim lake? You're going from 15 to 30, but will you have a restrictor on it?
Yeah, it's gonna be 15-inch restriction plate. Right now, there's the 15-inch culvert is there, so it's acting as the restrictor plate. When we replace that, there you'll see a new big concrete outlet structure that has, it'll look similar to like a small version of what we have in Chelsea. It'll have a big rack on the top, it'll have a 15-inch restrictor on it, and it'll keep that water throttled at a 15-inch diameter going through there until it builds up to the point where it's gonna crest the road, and then it'll drop down into the big rack and get across the road, under the road.
Sorry, that's Mike Spark from 6007.
Thank you.
I did have one other part of this question is, we've talked about this in pieces. Is there a systemic hydrological view of this that says the flow all the way from, as Stephen said, Kensington Green down to below the the Chagrin Lakes area that talks about what is the general water flow? So you understand, so we're not just putting corks and holes in the dam. I mean, it's
we've looked at that. That's when we did the master plan, stormwater master study, and then updated it again in 2021. Yeah. We're looking at watersheds. So if a drop of water falls on the highest ground, where does it go and how does it snowball by the time it gets down to the bottom? So yeah, we do look at that and take that very seriously.
And that analysis includes the addition of properties and this kind of thing, so you can take a look at, here's what the impact will be by subdivision or subdivision.
Correct.
Yeah, like when we did Manor Brook, it affects Fox Run, which affects Sugar Brook, which affects Chelsea. Yeah, it's all been looked at. 2004, 2021. All right.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Lake One that has the damaged or problematic culvert, it sounds like it's an exit pipe. That would be the HOA's responsibility to maintain that? It's a private lake, right?
Yes, all the lakes in Chagrin Lakes are private except the recreation lake, the swim lake. So we don't have any control, believe me, we wish we could treat that lake. We wish we could do other things.
The HOA can't do that? It's up to
No.
that property owner?
Yeah, it's up to that property owner. And actually, our bylaws prohibit us from improving or spending money outside of our common area off of Maple Springs. So we couldn't do it if we wanted to.
So,
But could the village,
go ahead, ma'am.
could the village help with the exit from that lake if they were granted access to the right, past the right of way?
To maintain somebody's private property, it gets real tough, Jim.
I'll say this, public utilities will consider that as Friday. What's the address for that house? Anybody know?
First one.
No, it's not, it's the third one.
1181, is that right?
But just so you're also looking, between, when it crosses the road in the first house and this lake we're talking about one, the water goes under two driveways.
It does.
And they're pathetic little itty bitty drain pipes under those. So you could fix the outlet and that's great, but we're gonna have a choke point under those two driveways
That's right.
unless something is addressed there, so.
So, let me say it this way, we see stormwater as a village-wide problem. That the village largely has a responsibility to take care of over time. Which is why we have the central retention, Manor Brook, why we're doing the culverts, all this other stuff. So, because it's a village-wide problem, it requires a village-wide solution in pieces, which might include culverts under driveways and keeping a restrictor plate so you guys don't get flooded out, okay? And yeah, it's on private property and the homeowner can tell us to buzz off, right? And our means of enforcing that are pretty limited without bringing out eminent domain or something like that, which we'd rather not do, okay? But so far, Whitetail was good. They gave us access to phase one, Manbrook. The village owned that property, so we didn't have to ask anybody. But Family Life Center, private property, we have to have an agreement. And we've had agreements with Family Life Center and with the Lantern.
And complicating the issue is a little bit is that Family Life Center is located in Bainbridge,
Yeah.
an entirely different township, you know. So then you ask us, you know, then we get into the situation of expending public funds on not only private property, but private property in another township, which then entails us either having a process where the solicitor gets involved of easements and or declaring nuisances, which provides us the opportunity to do some limited work because of the fact that the Ohio Revised Code limits some of the expenditures that any municipality and or township can do on private property. You know, generally it's very restrictive in terms of expending public funds on private issues. So we are looking at compromises, we are looking at different avenues where we can talk to some of these solutions, but that process is complicated and sometimes takes time. Do you have anything to add on that, solicitor?
No, I was just asking about the pond one. Is it owned by one private property owner or are there two?
There's two.
Any chance they'd be willing to enter into an ESID and figure that out, try to get that worked out?
Or any chance, could you change your bylaws of your HOA?
No, that, we tried that.
Anybody else have a comment before we leave? My last comment to you is I will be here until all questions are asked and answered. So
And
thank you for being here.
I do have one more. Jim, you've known me for some long time, Jim. And I don't want that. I'm actually very surprised at what I'm hearing today. And you could have reached out. I didn't know the scope of this problem. So my phone number is out there. It's public. And let's all come to some kind of solution so that Sherbrooke is not drowning.
All right, anybody else?
My mother always said it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark.
On that note, we have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Canton, second by Porter. All those in favor say aye. Aye. So we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your last comment.
Thank you very much. I'm still working on it. Digging out. Thank you for doing the most. Just one of my questions. Yeah, so, I know, I didn't know.